Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley. And with me today, I'm so honored to have Noelle Fowler. How are you today, Noelle?
Hey, Desiree. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Noelle, you are the owner and founder of Room to Breathe, and you are a holistic declutter coach. I love the idea of this holistic declutter. So we're for sure going to dive into that. But to start it off, Noelle, would you tell us how this journey began for you? How did this path open up for you to become a holistic declutter coach?
There's definitely a couple things that happened, but one of the biggest things was I'm a teacher full time and I had time off in the summer. And it was during the pandemic. I really got into organizing. I read the books, I watched Marie Kondo, all that stuff. And I actually opened my own LLC and decided to do professional organizing on the side. So I did that for a little bit and really loved it. And honestly was really good at it, taking people's stuff and creating order out of chaos and whatnot. But eventually I realized I was really just organizing people's junk. Like I was just taking their stuff, even though we would declutter, I would work with the client, we get rid of some stuff. I was still just organizing their junk. The bins were like Band-Aids. They weren't getting to the root of the clutter and the root of having so much stuff. And I went on my own journey and my husband and I decluttered 50% of our belongings. Yeah. And the freedom and the room to breathe that I felt from getting rid of so much stuff was, I was like, I need to teach people to do this for themselves. I don't want to be organizing for people anymore. I want to coach them to ruthlessly declutter and feel this experience that I'm feeling of just this lightness and this more simple life. So that's when I transitioned from being a professional organizer to a holistic declutter coach, which is what I do now. Specifically, I coach women through my membership called the Making Room membership. And so we do it together because decluttering is way better when you're doing it with other people.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. And you're right. Anytime we have to do work, it's easier when we do work together. It's that camaraderie, and it just seems less daunting when you've got somebody else to help you. If nothing else, you're having great conversation while you're going through these items, right?
Yeah, it's definitely not just good conversation, though. It's different points of view and seeing how other people organize their ordinary spaces. So much online, we see these Pinterest perfect homes. And I don't know about your house, but my house doesn't look like that. A lot of what I hear from the women who are part of my community is that it's just so refreshing to see real homes and people's real solutions to real life clutter and real life stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. That difference in perspective really can open our minds to new ways of handling something. So that's awesome. And so you mentioned in there about the root cause approach. And so talk with us a little bit more about that. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah. So have you ever decluttered a space and then it got cluttered up again just a couple of days later? I know that definitely happened to me. And part of that is because we're not addressing the root of our clutter. And a lot of the time, the root is something emotional, whether it's emotional attachment to items or maybe even a shopping habit that might need to change. Sometimes it's the stories we tell ourselves about our stuff, which is what I talk about a lot with the women I work with. We tell ourselves these stories that just aren't true. So, for example, one story is, I can't get rid of this item. I spent way too much money on it. Right? That's me. And so I help women rewrite those stories. And so the story rewrite for that is the money was spent when you first bought that item, not the moment you decide to let it go. You're not going to get that money back, but you will get your time back, your energy, physical space, breathing room. So a lot of the root causes, I can tell you some more as well, or the emotional ones. Another story we tell ourselves is, what if, right? What if I need this one day? What if I'm looking for this very obscure item that I found in my basement and I should just hold on to it just in case, right? And so the story right for that is, I've been fine without this for a while, and if I really needed it, I could probably easily replace it or borrow it from someone else. Of course, it depends on the item, right? But oftentimes stuff that we hold on to for these what if reasons are very small things. They're like cords from some old DVD, like something we don't even know what it's to. That's another root cause of clutter. And then another one, this one kind of controversial, is keeping it just because it was a gift from someone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the story for that is they gave me this gift because they care about me, not because they want me to have clutter. If I loved it or needed it, I would have used it by now. And maybe someone else could benefit from this.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's
And
really
then,
good.
like I said, that one's tricky because there's so much nuance to these. So don't hear me and think that black and white, if it's a gift and you don't use it, get rid of it. But when someone gives you a gift, they're not giving it to you because they want you to feel guilty or like you should keep it. They're giving it to you because they care about you. And if that item isn't adding value to your life and it's making you more stressed or overwhelmed in your home, then probably time to let it go.
Yeah. No, that's great. And thank you for expanding on that a little bit because I think many of us have experienced that as well as I can't get rid of this thing because I spent so much money on it. I think that's huge. I know for myself, I have had those thoughts on items that are in my closet, right? Like clothing, handbags, shoes, whatever. I can't get rid of this. Like I've spent so much money. I haven't got my worth out of it, my value
Mhm.
out of it, or whatever the thought is. So good stuff, Noelle, really to change that way that we're thinking about those things. And so I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And there's something else that we talked about before we started. And I think a lot of us fall into this problem where we see the stuff around us and we think, I'm lazy, I'm disorganized, everybody else has got this figured out, like they don't have junk all over their house. Is there something wrong with me? What can we do to kind of switch that script and work around that? What are your thoughts?
I hear that so often from women. I'm just a disorganized person. I just don't have it together like the other mom, or I'm just too lazy. And I don't think that's true. It's not helpful to speak about yourself so negatively. I understand the natural tendency, but the reality is, and from what I've seen, is that we have too much stuff. It's not that you're lazy, it's we have too much stuff. And of course you're overwhelmed. Of course you're stressed out. And if you lash out at your spouse or on your kid, because we're overstimulated. Every single thing we own costs more than we paid for it. It costs us our time to buy the thing, to bring the thing home, right? It costs us our physical space, which is also part of our mental peace when we have a flat surface full of stuff, that's not peaceful or home. It costs us our energy when we have to clean it or maintain it. And so those lies that we tell ourselves are not true. The reality is we're probably just overwhelmed with our stuff. And I truly believe that simplifying can fix that because I believe you could be the most disorganized person in the world. But if you ruthlessly decluttered and really went at it and addressed those root causes, you could be organized. You could live in a more simple home. It just takes some work. And getting there is hard, which is the women I work with, helping them get there.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a process, right? There's a bit of a mental aspect to it, as well as like you said, ruthlessly just get rid of these things, like physically removing them from your home. So it's not just necessarily a simple task, but it sounds like it can be if sort of take time to look at it from a different perspective. And I like that you said these lies that we're telling ourselves because they are. We're not speaking to ourselves in a way that we would speak to anybody else that we care about. And we're telling ourselves these things that just aren't true. Yeah. Thank you for reiterating this for us and delving into it a little bit more. And so I want to talk about something that is an interesting, like, how do you know the difference between decluttering and organizing? Because it sort of seems like it could be the same thing.
Yeah, totally wrong.
Okay.
No, that's a huge misconception, super common. And I think I thought the same thing, right? I started as an organizer and I thought I was making peace in people's homes. I wasn't really getting there. Organizing is the fun one that people want to do. Who doesn't want to organize and get Target and get the bins and the labels, right? And decluttering is part of organizing. But I would say decluttering is more important than organizing, because that is the process by which you are looking at your stuff and making decisions. Clutter is oftentimes delayed decisions. We just throw it in the drawer because I don't want to deal with it right now, or I'll just throw it on the counter and we'll deal with that pile later. Clutter is delayed decisions. Decluttering is really taking the time to go through and decide what is really adding value to your life and what is actually getting in the way of the kind of life you want to live. So people are super attracted to organizing, but I think decluttering is way more important. And if you truly do declutter, like I was saying before, your stuff has a way of organizing itself. That's not to say that you don't need to organize or create a system, or you can't have a bin for things, but just decluttering first makes it a lot easier to organize. And I think people oftentimes try to organize first. They try the bins first and they shove stuff in the bins first, and then they make it all nice and neat. And then a week later, the bins are overflowing, because if we don't address the root, why that stuff coming in the first place, the bins are just always going to be overflowing. I love organizing. I'm an organized person at heart, but decluttering is where that is the most important thing I think you can do.
Yeah, good point. And the idea of delayed decision making, I think, is really important to remember. And it's so true. It's you set the thing down, I'll get to it later, and then you never do. And then more things get piled on top of it. And I'm thinking like paper, mail, all of that kind of stuff, which happens for me. And I'm sure a lot of other people. And it is that delayed decision. And I'll just get to it at another point because I'm busy doing other things. And then it just continues to pile up. And so I love that concept. And so instead of delaying making this decision, what do you do instead?
Yeah, that's a great question, Desiree. It definitely depends on the item, but I think that part of what I work with women on is we, especially women, are the gatekeepers of our home a lot of the time, right? We decide what comes in our house and what doesn't. And so if we can start to sort of push back against the influx of things that comes into our home, that can make it so we have less decision. So my husband and I have a saying, like, people say free is for me. Free is not for me. I don't take wedding favors. And that, I know, some people might be like, what? Ouch. It's just, unless I can eat it. Like one time we went to a wedding and we had this cute little olive oil. I think we took that, but I think we also didn't even use it. Just because it's free doesn't mean that I need to bring it into my home, because it's another thing that I'm going to have to touch and decide what to do. So curbing that influx of things coming into our homes, which also as women, a lot of the time means curbing our shopping habit, which is really hard, because as a woman, I love shopping. I love clothes. But I need to make sure that I'm shopping for the right reasons. And if I find myself doing extra scrolling online, or even wanting to go to a store, which I don't even do much in person anymore to look at clothes, I need to check in with myself first and make sure I'm doing it for the right reason. Because I know for me, sometimes I'll shop out of emotion and I'll be like, it's a Friday, payday. I worked hard this week. I'm going to buy that dress I've been wanting, which maybe I do end up buying it, but not on a whim. So to go back to your question, I think we have to change some of our consumption habits. And that means stopping stuff before it comes in the door. Another one that some women do is they don't take like goodie bags from a birthday party for their kids or something, because that stuff, or maybe they do, but they just hold on to it for a day. You can play with the bouncy ball, bubble gum for a day, and then it's clutter, and then we learn to let go of it.
No, that's good stuff, Noelle. Really, some great points in there for us to think about and remember. And this idea of stopping something before it comes in your home, I think, is a great way to eliminate the clutter before it even happens. So I love that idea. And it is so easy for us to shop online now. It really is so incredibly easy. It was never this easy before. And I am in midlife, and I remember when we had to go to a mall and actually shop for something. You couldn't just be sitting on your couch scrolling through your phone and shop and just buy instantly. It was like it took time, it took energy, and it was a whole process. But it's so easy for us to do that now that it allows for this not just overconsumption, but all of these items that then become clutter if they're unnecessary. Right.
Definitely. Yeah. That's online shopping does not make it easier for sure. And Amazon, that too. You want something, you find on your doorstep in 24 hours. Never used to be like that. You're right.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about something else that is maybe difficult because we want to maybe be respectful. And that's if you have to declutter, say, someone's home that maybe has passed or you've inherited items and you're just like, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know what to do. If you feel like there's some guilt, maybe if I get rid of these things, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is such a hard situation. And again, there's so much nuance there. So I can't speak to a specific situation, right? But what I've seen has been really helpful for people is one, not doing it alone. So decluttering with someone else, whether that's family member or a friend, so you're not making those decisions alone because those are going to be really emotion-filled decisions about what to keep and what not to keep. And let's go with the situation of someone who has passed. I think it's really important to keep in mind what that person would want for you. So they would not want you to keep something out of guilt or out of should, like you should keep this. They are up there in heaven looking at you right now, and they want you to be present in your real life in this moment right now. And so if you're feeling like you need to keep something because you should or because it's out of guilt, then it's probably not the right reason to keep it. One thing I'll say with inherited items, and I'll just share my own experience. So I inherited some china from my grandmother who was passed, and I donated it. And I know that might shock some people, but for me, there wasn't any attachment to it. It wasn't the china I grew up eating on for Christmas dinner. And I checked in with some relatives first to see if they wanted it, and they didn't. And so ultimately, I made a decision to let go of it. And I feel better for that. And I think that my grandmother would be totally okay with that. She might laugh. She's probably laughing at her. Oh, Noelle, you crazy declutter coach. But for me, I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to use the fine china. Some people might think, oh, you should have sold it. It wasn't worth anything. And it wasn't worth it for me to keep it out of guilt. And it wasn't worth it to just sit in a box in my basement until I move one day. So something I'll say with that too is that some people inherit something like that and they're not going to use the china, but they don't want to get rid of all of it. And so my recommendation is to keep one thing and find a use for it. Or if you can't find a use for it, then put it somewhere where you'll see it and you'll remember that loved one when you walk by it every day. Because if you keep your little teapot from your grandmother, but it's sitting in a box in the basement, you're not going to remember her memory. So why not put it in a spot where you'll either use it or you'll walk past it every day and smile.
Yeah, good suggestion. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I love that you checked in with family members because why wouldn't you? If their grandmother too, they might want it instead. But if they didn't, it's who else can benefit from this and find use out of this. And so donating it is such a great way to share that with somebody else who could use it and would enjoy it more frequently than you would, or having it just sit in a box serving no purpose at all. So that's a great suggestion. Thank you. Maybe what are some other ideas that you can share for quick decluttering? Like if you've only got 5 or 10 minutes and you're like, I just can't take it anymore. I've got to figure out how I can get something done really quickly so that this isn't so messy.
Yes, that's exactly what would then come to me. They're like, I am overwhelmed. What do I do? So the method that I teach is actually just in 15-minute decluttering session. If you have a longer chunk of time, that's awesome. But I feel like that 15-20 minute mark is where we really can get a quick win. And those small quick wins motivate us to keep going. Not that same day, maybe not even that same week, but we reap the benefits from that. So I tell people to start in the bathroom for a couple of reasons. The bathroom has no sentimental clutter. There's no grandma's china in there, right? No inherited jewelry. And you use the bathroom multiple times a day. So you'll go in there and when you do declutter, you'll feel that. You'll feel that room to breathe. a couple times. And if someone is really just getting started, I say clear off the bathroom counter. That's step one. Clear off the bathroom counter, keep it that way for a day and see how it feels. Because once you have it that way, you will not want to go back. You will find a way to put that toothpaste away in the medicine cabinet or in the drawer. And the more we declutter, when you declutter under the sink or you declutter the linen closet, you'll have room for those kinds of things. And they won't have to sit out on the counter. Start in the bathroom, work in 15-minute chunks. And if not the bathroom, you could do your car. That's a really easy one. The center console and the cup holders. So often we have junk in there. So when we go to sit down and put our coffee mug, it's annoying because you got to shuffle stuff. So cards are really good. Your purse, your wallet, one drawer, one cabinet in the kitchen. Those are really good small places to start. And you'll get that quick win and that'll keep you going.
Yeah, good advice. I love that, little chunks of time, because otherwise it does become overwhelming, or you start to think, this is going to take me forever. But if you just look at one drawer or just one cabinet and just, that's it, I'm going to just do this one thing and then I'll be done. But you're right. It's those quick wins when you build up 1 week, next week you do another, whatever. It's just like amazing what you can accomplish, right? It doesn't have to be this 8-hour day thing where you're trying to cover your whole house. And the idea of starting with your bathroom, because there's nothing in there that you're going to be like, oh, but I can't give this away, or I can't get rid of this. The bathroom is probably the least sentimental. So that's a fantastic suggestion. And, for myself, recently we have moved and our bathroom does not have drawers in the vanity, whereas our previous bathroom did. And so I have been forced to figure out new ways to store my things so that they're not on the counter. And that's been a big deal. But I love having a nice open bathroom vanity. So it makes you think a little bit differently. What do I really need? How can I store this differently? How can I organize this differently? Or just get rid of something that I'm holding on to for no reason?
Yeah, and I feel like you moving and having to sort of shift how you organize things, right? Because you've decluttered, especially as you've moved. It's a good little challenge for you to go through again and be like, do I really need this? One thing I've seen that has worked with people who don't have drawers is they have an everyday bin.
Mm.
So their stuff that they use every day just goes in that bin. They pull it out, put it on the counter, do your stuff, put it back in the bin, and then put the bin away. I don't know if that's a system that would work for you, but for anyone who's listening who doesn't have drawers, that has worked really well in the past.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I do have a little basket that I keep all my skincare products in. So at least it's all organized into one little thing on my counter. If I had a little bit more space, I could tuck that under my sink and then it would be completely off. But it's okay. I've chosen it and I like the way that it looks. And so I'm fine with that. But if it becomes an issue where you've got these things that are visually distracting, then that's when you need to decide, can I do this differently? And so I love that.
Yeah. And Desiree, you said it. You like it that way. You think it looks nice. That's so important because having a simple home and having less clutter is going to look different for different people. We all have different clutter thresholds. So it works for you. You like it. That's awesome. That's how it should be.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, so let's talk now about if there's some other suggestions that you can make for the listeners who are still like, I just don't know where to start. And I get the bathroom, like, okay, I could do that, but my garage is a disaster zone, or my dining room looks like my kids' backpacks are everywhere and shoes and whatever. So what are your thoughts or suggestions for people who are encountering those types of issues?
One thing I want to say is that's super common. So you are not alone in that. I mean, a lot of women don't have dining room tables because they take up so much of our stuff, and our garages are so full we can't even put our cars in them, right? So you are definitely not alone in that if that's your case. I would say for a place like the dining room, clearing off a flat surface can be really helpful because if you have flat surfaces that are clear, it makes the whole room look better, even if it's not totally done. But if you're starting and you are super overwhelmed, grab a trash bag. trash is super easy to throw out, right? We just walk around the trash bag, and anything that we know that is absolute trash, you can get rid of. And you'll begin to see some of the space opening up. And that's going to get you motivated. In terms of like the backpacks on the floor and stuff like that, I think I know part of the issue is that we have clutter because we don't have a place for our items to live. And so if there's no home for the backpacks, if there's no hook, or if there's no behind the door hook situation or whatever it might be, no mudroom, no cabinet for it, then it's just going to end up on the floor. And that's not just for kids, that's for adults too. We don't know where to put something. It just lands on the counter or it just lands on the dining room table. So deciding what you want to keep, like backpacks, important. Deciding what you want to keep, what matters most, and then creating a home for it that's going to help you combat that clutter. And I would just say with the dining room, baby steps for sure. Clearing off those flat surfaces, figuring out what does need a home and creating the home. And then as you work through that room, you'll start to see, oh yeah, we don't really use these orange linen napkins that I got for Halloween one year. Maybe I can donate them, right? As you build your decluttering muscle, you're able to make some of those bigger decisions, which getting rid of orange linen napkins might not seem like a big decision, but if you try to do that right away, it might feel like a lot. And then I'll just say garages, that's the last place. I would declutter everywhere else first and then head to your garage because that's going to be one of the bigger projects for sure.
Yeah, definitely more time consuming because if it's so full that you can't fit your vehicles in there, then that means there's a lot of stuff. Or it's just strewn about and in a fashion that it's just everywhere. But this advice is so great. I love the give it a home, find a place for it to go. And not everybody has homes that are set up or they've got maybe a closet right inside the front door that they can hang these things in. And so you have to do a little bit of thinking about like, how can I maybe rearrange or how can I organize it? And like, it just requires you to think differently, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's part of it. Like as a professional organizer, when I was doing it for people, I wasn't, as much as I could ask questions about their life, I wasn't then. You are the expert of your life. You know your lifestyle. You know if you're actually going to hang the backpack up or if you need a bin to throw it in. So that's why I like to coach people to do it for themselves. Because then in your next life, when there's no backpacks left and now it's your purse selection, I don't know, you can start to develop systems and make decisions like that for yourself.
Yeah. That goes back to the point that you made also about the muscle. You're building up this muscle, right? And so if you make these decluttering decisions on super easy things, it's okay, that orange napkins, I don't need those. I could easily give those away. Doing those small things easily, like these decisions are super easy, but it like builds up that muscle so that when you get to the difficult items, you've got some strength behind you. And so you can make these decisions easier because you've worked on that over time. So I love that as well. And you're absolutely right. Maybe there isn't space for hooks, but you can do bins or baskets or whatever if you've got a shoe place, because when you walk in, you take your shoes off. And so you can put some baskets in there and backpacks go in there too. So it's great that you're helping people figure out what works for them, because then they'll be consistent about doing it going forward. If you try to tell somebody to do something in a way that's counterintuitive to them or doesn't work for their life, they're not going to continue doing it.
You have to have skin in the game too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so I really have enjoyed this conversation and I love these ideas that you have shared with us. Is there any other suggestions or anything else that you think that the listeners really need to know to begin this process?
One thing I'll say is that if you are overwhelmed with stuff, if you feel overwhelmed in your home, specifically for women, if you are feeling overwhelmed, this analogy has been really helpful for me. If your bathtub was overflowing, you wouldn't get a bucket and start bailing the water out. You would turn the faucet off. And so sometimes we need to turn the faucet off with our shopping habit. I know that that was one of the roots of my clutter. So turn the shopping habit off, whatever, maybe that means for a week, maybe that means for a month. until you get a handle on your clutter, I've seen that be really helpful for women.
Oh, yeah. Excellent suggestion. Thank you, Noelle. Wow. You couldn't have made it any clearer there. It's no, you don't want water running through your bathroom into your house. And so just turn that off. And that goes back to that gatekeeping. Like, don't even bring it into your house. So good stuff. I love that. And you mentioned early on in the show about your coaching and you have a membership. And so I want you to share with us, what does that mean exactly? And what do you do with that?
Yeah, so I run the Making Room membership, which is an online community for busy women who want to simplify their lives to make room for what matters most. Because no one wants to be just maintaining their stuff or handling all their clutter. We all want to be spending time with our families or taking care of our health, things like that. And a lot of the time, clutter gets in the way of that. So the Making Room membership is a community for women. And we have monthly coaching calls. And each month we will focus on one specific room in the home to make it nice and easy, not overwhelming. And we also have an online app. It's a private app where our community connects and you're able to ask questions and hear from me and some of the other members of the group. And so you learn about how to declutter. You get the accountability you need from me, your coach, and from the other women in the community. And then you feel that support and encouragement from the other women as well. So it's been really amazing to see some of the transformations of women who went from overwhelmed and overstimulated and felt like they were snappy at their spouses and just couldn't handle the stuff to truly feeling like they've made room for what matters to them in their lives. I love making your membership. I love just running it. And I'm really looking forward to perhaps having some of your listeners joining. So if they want to hear about that or if they want to learn more about that, they can find me on Instagram at Make Room to Breathe. And if that doesn't sound like what you need right now, like you're not looking for that next step, I do have a free guide called Let's Make Room, a simple guide to go from clutter to calm. And that is a free download. And it has some of those stories that we talked about earlier, the stories we tell ourselves. Can't get rid of this because I spent too much money. It has the story rewrites for that as well as some other really good tips that people have found. So I would love if they went on over to my Instagram page and downloaded that.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us, Noelle. And I'll include the information in the show notes, of course, so listeners can easily find you on Instagram and how to get to the membership. And there's something that you said in there, and this idea going back to not only does the clutter like take our money because we're buying stuff or whatever, but it just sort of disrupts our sense of calm and peace because there's just stuff everywhere, right? And so thank you for reiterating that and how not only does it cause lost money, it's loss in peace and calm and serenity in your home.
Absolutely. And nothing is worth your peace. No item, right? And ultimately, we're not going to find our satisfaction in our physical belonging. If you ask someone what matters most to them, no one is going to fit their house or their car.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. Oh, gosh. Well, Noelle, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this such valuable information with us. I so appreciate it. And before we close out, I always like to ask my guests if there's books that they have found beneficial or if there's podcasts that they listen to that they think would be helpful for the listeners. I'd love for you to share those with us now.
I have read so many books about simplicity and specifically minimalism. Now, that word minimalism might freak people out. It doesn't mean white couch and white wall. I have read books by Joshua Becker, including The Minimalist Home, The More of Less. Joshua Becker is a minimalist writer and blogger. He's a former pastor, and he just talks about how minimalism is the intentional promotion of things that matter most and the removal of anything that gets in the way of that. So don't let that word minimalism scare you. So look up Joshua Becker. And then one other book that has just been really important to me called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. And that talks about some of the internal things that we need to do to live more simply. It is a book about faith for anyone who's interested in that. And yeah, I just highly recommend those books.
Awesome. I'll include that in the show notes as well. And is there any podcasts that you enjoy listening to that you want to share?
There is one podcast I love. It's not necessarily about simple living, but it's called the Fighting for Joy podcast. And it is about walking through grief. And it doesn't have to be you've had significant grief in your life. It could be any sort of grief. I have just found that podcast has been really formative in understanding what really matters in this world. So Fighting for Joy podcast with Jody Blick, it's a great one.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That sounds amazing. And I will include that for the listeners to find as well. Noelle, thank you for your time and this information. Why don't you share again how the listeners can find you on Instagram? And are you on Facebook or anywhere else? Or is it Instagram just the best way to find you?
Instagram is definitely the best way to find me, and it's at Make Room to Breathe.
Perfect. And I'll include that for the listeners as well. Thank you again, Noelle. It's been a delight to have you on, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Desiree. This was great.
We'll talk more soon. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in to another insightful episode of the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. We appreciate your time and curiosity as we explore fascinating topics together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to join us next week for another amazing episode. Remember, your journey of learning and growth is a continuous adventure, and we're thrilled to be part of it. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next week, stay curious and keep exploring those pockets of knowledge.